There is a particular kind of silence that only arrives after loss. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of collapse. When the noise of ambition, routine, and expectation disappears, and all that remains is the echo of your own thoughts. At 40 years old, I found myself inside that silence. Not young enough to believe I had unlimited time. Not old enough to feel finished. Just exposed, empty, and forced to look directly at the consequences of a life that had quietly drifted off course. Bankruptcy does not arrive all at once. It arrives slowly, disguised as denial. Small compromises, delayed decisions. The belief that things will somehow fix themselves if you wait long enough. I told myself stories to stay comfortable, that this was temporary, that one good opportunity would solve everything, that I still had control, but control was already gone. I had handed it over piece by piece to fear, avoidance, and pride. The hardest part was not the lack of money. It was the collapse of identity. For years, I had tied my worth to productivity, to being capable, to being the one who had answers. When the numbers went to zero, something inside me followed. I did not just lose income, I lost certainty. Uncertainty, once gone, leaves the mind searching for escape. At 40, society expects stability, progress, proof that your choices made sense. Failure at that age feels heavier because it threatens the story you tell yourself about who you are supposed to be. I felt late, behind, ashamed. These emotions do not motivate action, they freeze it. Neuroscience explains why. Shame activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. The brain interprets it as threat, and when the brain feels threatened, it seeks safety, not growth. This is why so many people stay stuck after failure. Not because they lack intelligence or ability, but because their nervous system is overwhelmed. I spent months oscillating between panic and numbness. Some days I tried to fix everything at once. Other days I avoided reality entirely. Both were forms of escape. Neither produced clarity. The turning point did not come from motivation. It came from honesty. A brutal, quiet acknowledgement that the life I had built no longer existed, and that clinging to it was costing me the chance to build a new one. That moment hurt. But it also simplified everything. When you have nothing left to protect, truth becomes lighter. I stopped pretending. I stopped blaming circumstances. I stopped asking why this happened to me and started asking what this moment was asking from me. The answer was not money. It was structure. I realized that my external collapse mirrored an internal one. My routines were inconsistent. My boundaries were weak. My discipline depended on emotion. I had relied on momentum instead of systems, and momentum always fades. The first shift was psychological. I stopped seeing bankruptcy as proof of failure and started seeing it as feedback. Painful feedback, but precise. Something was unsustainable. Something needed to change at the root. I rebuilt from the inside, not the outside. Each day began with the same question. What is the smallest disciplined action I can take today that restores self-respect? Not income, not success. Self-respect. That changed everything. I woke up at the same time every day. Not because it felt good, but because consistency calmed my nervous system. I simplified my nutrition, reduced stimulation, removed noise. When life feels unstable, simplicity becomes strength. I trained my body not to look strong, but to feel grounded. Movement stabilized my emotions. Breath work slowed my mind. Silence replaced panic. Spiritually, I returned to stillness. Prayer was not a request for rescue. It was an act of surrender. An acceptance that control had limits, but responsibility did not. Halfway through this rebuilding process, I realized I did not have to reorganize my life alone. There were guidance materials that helped people understand collapse, rebuild discipline, and break scarcity patterns. The links are in the description. Slowly, clarity returned. Not optimism, clarity. The ability to see what mattered and what did not, to distinguish urgency from importance, to act without drama. I stopped chasing big wins and started building stable systems, fixed schedules, defined priorities, clear constraints. Discipline became my safety net. Money returned gradually, not magically, not dramatically, but sustainably, because the person handling it had changed. The most powerful transformation was internal. I no longer needed to prove anything. I needed to align with reality. When ego quiets, learning accelerates. At 40, I thought I was starting over. In truth, I was starting correctly for the first time. Failure stripped away illusions. It removed shortcuts. It forced honesty. And honesty, though painful, is efficient. If you are facing collapse later in life, understand this. It is not too late. It is simply precise. You see things now that you could not see before. Wisdom often arrives through loss. Throughout this transformation, clarity emerged through ebooks that strengthened the mind, dismantled scarcity thinking, and helped rebuild life from within. If you feel ready for that step, the links are in the description. Bankruptcy did not end my life. It ended a version of me that was no longer sustainable. The turning point was not financial. It was internal. The moment I chose discipline over denial, structure over chaos, responsibility over fear. When the mind changes, the body responds. When the body aligns, life transforms. Like the video, subscribe to the Mind Forge, and remember, collapse can be the most honest beginning you ever experience.